Having one of your natal planets conjunct a full moon is a very powerful experience for us, both in the micro scale of the moment and the macro scale of our journey in life. And it indicates a time where we're either going to feel emotional volatility or emotional completion around a certain subject. So in this video, I want to break down what it means to have your natal planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, all of them conjunct a full moon. So if you recently discovered that there's a full moon happening in a certain degree and one of your natal planets or points in your chart are also at that same degree in the same sign, watch this video where I'm going to break down what this means for you. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Isabelle, your spiritual rebel friend, and today I want to talk about what it means to have natal planets conjunct the full moon specifically. This will be part of a new series that I hopefully eventually wrap up, covering what it means to have natal planets conjunct other transits such as new moons, sun seasons, etc. So if you enjoy this video, leave a comment below and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more videos on this topic and other related topics on astrology and more, because not only do we talk about astrology on this channel, but Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, and other things as well. So if you enjoy the video, subscribe, stay tuned for more. In this video, I'm going to break down some of the major planets and what it means for them to be conjunct the full moon, and what this means as far as not just interpreting a horoscope, but the effects maybe it's having on your greater journey, so to say. Because when we have a conjunction with a natal planet, it activates that part of our personality. And depending on what kind of event it is, in this case a full moon, this could be wrapping up a 1-year cycle for you. Or even a 6-month cycle for you. So I want to break down all of what that means. I felt inspired to share this because as of filming this video, we are in full moon in Taurus shadow period. And I noticed that it was happening at 24/25 degrees of Taurus, and 24/25 because Uranus is also here. And I looked at my chart and realized my Venus, which is actually a huge part of my personality and my growth because it's in the same sign as my North Node, I realized it's conjunct my Venus. And so I felt really inspired to do this video because I know this is having huge effects for me personally, and I can feel the shifts. And being aware that this event is happening has been very insightful into what I should be reflecting on and where I may be at in my journey right now. So if you want to jump to a specific conjunction, check out the timestamps below where I put timestamps for each planetary conjunction for Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, etc. If you want to find out all the information for all these, if you're trying to learn just to be your own astrologer, watch on. As a quick overview, just to understand for further interpretations, a full moon is a time of completion. A full moon is when the sun and moon are opposing each other. The sun is the ego and vitality. It's what gives us strength and confidence. The moon is our emotional well-being, our inner child, our emotional fulfillment. And so what this represents is a contrasting moment where we recognize that we need a bit of both in life. And whatever the sun and moon are in, whatever the full moon is in, tells us what that contrast is. So an example, if it was a full moon in Scorpio, the moon being in Scorpio, the sun being in Taurus, we're reflecting on themes of the contrast between Scorpio and Taurus themes in our lives, in their represented houses that they're happening in. So that could be an example, 5th and 11th house, because they're opposing. We're recognizing the duality, how we need both, and experiencing a completion of a cycle and experiencing a completion of learning that is both 2 weeks long and also 6 months long. So each planetary conjunction, natal planetary conjunction, with the full moon is going to be a completion of a cycle and a fulfillment of something. We're reaping harvest, and you're going to be reaping harvest, so to say, around the themes that your natal planet rules over. If the full moon is conjunct your natal sun, this brings a completion to a cycle around what gives you a sense of strength and vitality. Over the last 6 months, you may have been in a cycle of trying to figure out, who am I truly? What is my sense of self-identity rooted in? And what is my relationship like with my ego? This could stereotypically be completing a cycle around healing the ego or letting go of the ego. However, I do want to note the idea with the sun is not only is it our ego, which oftentimes the ego is associated as a negative thing. The ego is something we can't get rid of. We can't get rid of our sun sign. And in fact, the sun is not just our ego, but it's our vitality. So with a full moon conjunct your natal sun, what this can really indicate is a time where you are finding a new way to find strength and changing your relationship with this ego side of you to make it a place of strength and confidence rather than self-defense. An interesting dynamic too that plays out when we have our natal sun conjunct a full moon is not only is your sun conjunct the moon, but naturally it's opposing the current sun. And so what maybe is giving you vitality now in subtle ways, or where you may feel extra strength in your life, is going to be opposite of where you naturally feel strength in life. And so there's this duality you find between seeking out a sense of strength and self-confidence through your natural habitual way of doing so, and finding new ways to find strength and confidence as the sun is opposing each other naturally with this placement. With this also, though, is naturally just the interpretation that the sun is conjunct the moon. Your emotional fulfillment and your ego can be on the same page. What gives you strength and what gives you satisfaction are coming together in harmony. I would always note with whatever full moon we're having, whatever it's conjunct in your chart, looking back 6 months to seeing when the new moon was in that sign, even if it wasn't conjunct your sun or whatever placement then, to know what you are initiating during that time. That can be wrapped up. If your natal moon is conjunct the full moon, what this brings is an emphasis on your emotions, and this can stereotypically bring a bit of emotional volatility or even just more emotional awareness. A full moon is shining a light on things. It's making things aware, and so you can feel more aware of your emotions during this time. The moon moves in 28-day cycles, and so it's much more common for us to experience what I call a moon return, a lunar return, as you'll hear other astrologers refer to it as well. So every 28 days, we have a lunar return. However, this feeling of coming home to our emotions is emphasized when we have a full moon conjunct our natal moon. So when we have our natal moon and the full moon conjunct, it multiplies the moon energy, and naturally a full moon in any sign is bringing us to better awareness of what brings us emotional fulfillment. But when this is conjunct our natal moon, we can have further realizations on what brings us emotional satisfaction and how we fulfill that. Like I said, for the sun, looking back to when the new moon was in the same sign can be helpful to know what themes may be wrapped up, what you've initiated, and now what you are completing. This could be a time overall, though, of emotional harmony, emotional connection, maybe a bit of emotional cleansing and purging, and emotional satisfaction. We're recognizing new ways of fulfilling our emotional needs. If your natal Mercury is conjunct a full moon, this puts an emphasis on emotional communication. You feel emotionally driven to communicate the way you naturally like to do so. Think of it this way. When we have a full moon, the sun is shining a light on the moon because it's directly opposing, so the flashlight, so to say, can point directly at the moon. But if your Mercury is there too, it's also going to highlight that as well, and they're going to work together. So your moon being your emotions, or what brings you emotional fulfillment right now, the way in which you're trying to find emotional fulfillment now is working together with your communication style. I would say the simplest way to put this is your communication could be highlighted. You can feel emotional ease in your communication, and you can be recognized for how you communicate. In some expressions, this could be, depending on the house it's in, this could be publishing something, writing something, speaking something, singing something. This could, though, simply be just a conversation with loved ones. There's an emotional connection happening here, and there's a fulfillment. I would recommend, of course, as I say, for all natal planet conjunct full moon experiences, to look back at when the new moon was, even if it wasn't conjunct your Mercury then, what things are coming up. What were you initiating in relevance to that archetype? And what are you maybe fulfilling now during this time? Naturally, with it being conjunct your Mercury means that your natural way of communicating is highlighted. And so pay attention to those themes. Learn about what it means to have your Mercury in that sign, and how is that something you can embrace more. You may find that you're more emotionally fulfilled the more you express, or by leaning into your natural communication and learning style, you're feeling more sense of emotional harmony and emotional fulfillment. With a full moon conjunct Mercury, this could also mean a completion of a cycle in learning, or specifically learning how you communicate. So you could be evolving your communication style in some form or fashion. Noting the house that this is happening in will tell you where you're experiencing a communication up-leveling. For example, if you're having a full moon conjunct your natal Mercury in your 7th house, you're up-leveling your communication style in your one-on-one relationships. If your natal Venus is conjunct a full moon, this brings a completion to a cycle around how you express your divine beauty, both in relationships and in your own life. Venus is the planet of love and of values, really. And so when we have a full moon conjunct our Venus, we could be experiencing a shift in our values in one end, which is changing how you find beauty in the world through how you move through life, or changing something, of course, stereotypically in your style. I know for me, as I'm having this full moon conjunct Venus, I have seriously considered changing my style, cutting my hair more than ever before. And I want to experience that shift in stepping into beauty. But a full moon is a fulfillment. And so when we have a full moon conjunct our Venus, this really means that we're in emotional harmony with our divine femininity. And I think while this is important for everyone to note, it's especially important for women to note, because stepping into our feminine receptive mode, owning our divine feminine power is emphasized. So this means that we could feel more called to relax, to indulge, to do less and be more of a human being rather than a human doing. Venus is just, well, I've said, our divine feminine. To break that down more, what this means is that we are experiencing a culmination point with what we think it means to live a good life. And so there's really an emphasis here on experiencing a completion in our values. So when a full moon is conjunct our Venus, we feel a sense that we recognize what gives us a sense of what a valuable life is. We're recognizing what a valuable life means to us and wanting to live in harmony with that. So there's definitely value shifts that are going on, but not necessarily in the sense of integrity and discipline, but it feels like a surrender, since Venus is all about receptivity. A full moon conjunct our natal Venus, of course, though, can also mean love interactions. Venus does naturally put us in a feminine receptive mode, and so we could be receiving love, inquiries, opportunities during this time. If your natal Mars is conjunct a full moon, you feel very physically active and emotionally active. What this means is that your physical energy and emotional energy are going hand in hand to be accentuated, and so you can feel very stir crazy. You're wanting to take action. Even though full moons are stereotypically a time to receive, not initiate, I think that when we have a full moon conjunct our Mars, what that really feels like is the desire to move, and maybe even just a realization on how we want to move through life. So when the full moon is conjunct our Mars, this puts an emphasis for us on acting in alignment. And acting in alignment for us will mean acting in alignment with our emotions, since this is conjunct the moon. So you may feel more emotionally driven in your actions, and depending on the sign it is in, will indicate what kind of emotional drive that is rooted in. But regardless, we feel an emotional drive to take action, an emotional desire to flow, an emotional desire to own also our talents, because our Mars is not just our action, it is what we're naturally talented at. And so our talents could be highlighted during this time. So this could be in career or in creative expression, but regardless of where it's showing up in your life, a full moon conjunct our Mars shows us that we are being recognized and emotionally fulfilled by our talents. We have a natural way of moving through life, and we can be more seen for that during this time and emotionally fulfilled by it. So that's what it means to have the full moon conjunct the big five. And yes, I will go through in just a minute what it means briefly for Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune. But I really quick want to interject instead and talk about two major points that I consider to be highly important in our chart, if not the most important to know in our chart, or at least the most helpful if we're on the path towards self-growth or spiritual growth. At least it has been for me. So if a full moon is conjunct Black Moon Lilith, I've noticed this is huge for people. Black Moon Lilith is a point in our chart. And if you have no idea what Black Moon Lilith is, well, I made my camera shake there. If you have no idea what Black Moon Lilith is, check out my video series where I talk about what Black Moon Lilith is and what it means to have it in each sign and each house. I'm giving an exaggerated movement here, so I don't forget to put the card in. But check out my Black Moon Lilith series. Black Moon Lilith is a point which represents our place of shame and power, to put it simply. It's a place of healing, childhood healing, inner child healing. And I've noticed this is a huge transit for people. Whenever we have a full moon conjunct our Black Moon Lilith, we're doing deep inner healing. Wherever Black Moon Lilith is in our chart tells us a part of our personality that we felt ashamed or rejected for in childhood. And it is also something that we can heal and can be one of our greatest talents. So when we heal this, when we have a full moon conjunct Black Moon Lilith, there puts an emphasis on healing. We could be realizing some of our wounds, which means that we'll feel very wounded during that time. We can feel like old wounds are coming to the surface. And yet at the same time, because it's a full moon, we are healing these things and letting it go. A full moon conjunct Black Moon Lilith seems to be very, very big for people's spiritual journey, as I've noticed from readings and from clients and from personal experience and family experience observing. This is a time for us to do major healing, and it really seems to pivot our lives. So if you have a full moon conjunct Black Moon Lilith, this is a time of healing, of maybe old wounds coming up, but also old wounds being let go. It can be helpful to note when the new moon was in that sign last 6 months prior to know what you may have been deciding you wanted to heal about yourself and seeing how far you've come. The other major aspect in a chart that is huge to note if you have a full moon conjunct this point is the North Node. And so with that, I'll also say the South Node and give a brief interpretation because it is different to have a full moon conjunct North versus South Node, but both are important to note. If you have a full moon conjunct your North Node, you are making major changes, major emotional fulfillment, major leaps forward with your growth journey. And you can be finding the emotional resonance with your highest self. The North Node is our highest path to growth in life. It is the area of astrology that is hardest for us to embrace. And so when we learn to embrace it in a certain area of life, dictated based off the house it resides in, we complete our well-being. We can reach into a part of ourselves that is our untapped potential. And so when we have a full moon conjunct our North Node, stepping into our growth feels easier. We get to momentarily experience what it feels like to be in our growth and recognize how to stay there. A full moon conjunct the North Node in the end is an emotional fulfillment of our growth journey. And so vice versa of that, if you have a full moon conjunct your South Node, what this means is that you may be naturally in your overused talents, which can in some expressions be a negative thing. However, I don't see astrology necessarily as negative and positive. It can be just more challenging, but there's two interpretations to this. You could either A, be overusing your naturally overused talents, falling into your old self, but this can also be a good thing because it is our overused gifts and talents. So option 2 with that, if you have a full moon conjunct your South Node, your talents, your natural talents are being accentuated, and this can serve you in whatever area of life in which the full moon is happening in. So regardless, a South Node full moon conjunction puts an emphasis on your natural talents and asks you to step back into them. The South Node is also our spiritual growth, or our spiritual fulfillment, they call it. So you may be feeling at home and more connected to your soul self, so to say. Whereas if you have a full moon conjunct the North Node, you're experiencing more material reward. You're experiencing material reality in its highest expression. So now that I interjected this video with my 2 favorite points to talk about, let's come back to some of the other major planets in our chart and briefly what this means to have a full moon conjunct each of them. So if you have a full moon conjunct Jupiter, this is a time to reap reward and both spiritual and material growth. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, so we can experience some sort of expansion that brings emotional fulfillment. Looking back to when the new moon was can tell you what you initiated, what you wanted to receive, and now you can be receiving that. I think this for some people could mean a financial reward, and for others this could mean a spiritual up-leveling or a bit of both. I love to say that in the end, Jupiter really does represent the law of attraction, where that which is likened to itself is drawn. And so whatever emotional frequency you embrace at that time is what you will receive. What I've noticed with people who have a full moon conjunct their Jupiter, they're getting to step up and up level into the next phase of their life, so to say. It really feels like you're stepping into the next version of yourself with higher standards or higher capacity even. You're expanding your capacity to receive, and so something could be changing in your life that requires you to be more open, be more expansive, be more trusting, or expand your spiritual philosophy. That's what I've really noticed with a full moon conjunct Jupiter. On the other hand, if you have a full moon conjunct your natal Saturn, what this means is it's mainly a time for you to, it'll feel like lie low and be more responsible. You feel like you're shifting into high gear, you're focused, you're disciplined. Saturn is our responsibility, and so we may be taking more responsibility for ourselves and our actions during this time. The house that Saturn is in and the full moon is happening in is going to indicate where you may be engaging in more responsible action during this time. But regardless, this can feel a time where we are reserving our energy, is what it feels like. And I say that because I know that every season in a different interpretation slightly, every Cancer season when the sun transits over my moon and Saturn, which are conjunct, it feels like a time to be more responsible for ourselves. And because this is a full moon we're talking about, you can feel more emotionally responsible for yourself. You can feel like your emotions are more tame, your emotional well-being is more stable, because the planet of restriction here is giving you some strength. In another interpretation, this could mean that with a Saturn, natal Saturn conjunct the full moon, you could be being a bit more responsible in an extreme end, in the sense that you are being parental towards yourself and criticizing towards yourself. So this is something just to observe. If the full moon is conjunct your natal Uranus, something unexpected is going to happen, and you are invited to change the way you think and think differently to protect and fulfill your emotional well-being. Uranus is the planet of sudden, unexpected change and innovative thinking. It brings unexpected events to teach us to think differently, to fire new neural pathways. And so when we have a full moon, the moon being our emotions, conjunct this, we can have something happening in the two areas of life which are activated based off of the sun and moon that they are in. And it invites us to think differently, to fulfill our emotional well-being. Or it teaches us a new way of thinking that gives us another layer, a deeper level of emotional well-being. If the full moon is conjunct your natal Neptune, what this means is that we can feel a bit more, simply put, head in the clouds, idealistic, in our dreams, so to say. Neptune is the planet of illusions, is the planet of dreams, it's the planet of fantasy, it's the planet of ideals. It's supposed to represent the deep waters of Neptune, of Poseidon, the waters, the quite literal waters. But how this plays out is through idealism, so to say. And so when we have the full moon conjunct Neptune, it means that we're more in touch with what we feel, but we may not be able to think clearly. And so what I've noticed for people who have the full moon conjunct their natal Neptune, which usually is a collective thing that happens because Neptune moves so slowly, we can have this feeling of just head in the clouds, a bit of fogginess. And so we are feeling our way through life rather than thinking our way through it. And so this is a time for us to really take the pressure off and just get in touch with how we feel and focus on how we want to feel. If the full moon is conjunct your natal Pluto, what this means is this is a time for you to do some deep karmic healing or heal and let something go. Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth. And so when the moon is conjunct Pluto, we can be having an emotional fulfillment and a realization of what we need to let go of in order to be reborn. If the full moon is conjunct Chiron in your chart, then what this means is this is a time for you to recognize a wound that may need to be healed and recognize how you're healing it in other people. Similar to having the full moon conjunct black moon Lilith, this can be a time where we feel wounded. However, there's a key interpretation difference here. With black moon Lilith conjunct the full moon, in my interpretation, this is a time for us to recognize our wounds and learn to heal it and own the power. Whereas when we have a full moon in conjunct our Chiron, this tends to be a time where we recognize the wound, but we're kind of just sitting in it, because Chiron is the wounded healer. It is a wound that we do need to heal, but it's something we usually give away to other people. So it may be more present in our external world, whereas black moon Lilith is more about what's happening in our internal world. Chiron conjunct a full moon is really more of bringing up external factors to recognize our wound, and we may be healing it in other people rather than in ourselves. So it's something to play with, definitely, for sure. We should, of course, heal ourselves, but naturally with a full moon conjunct Chiron, we can feel like there's more triggers in the outside world rather than the internal world. If the full moon is conjunct your part of fortune in your chart, this is a time for you to rapidly manifest more financial success or financial fortune. The part of fortune is said to be the middle point between your sun, moon, and rising. And so these key factors of your personality could be coming together to help you bring financial reward and financial fulfillment and monetary gain. And really the way to do this is by embracing your emotional well-being, because this is a full moon we're talking about. We're stepping into our emotional harmony And at the same time, while this brings us emotional harmony, we could be receiving financial reward. So I probably missed some planets and points. I know that I always do. I know I did not talk about the midheaven, the IC line, the ascendant, the descendant, as well as Vesta, Juno, which you guys have all mentioned that I should start doing. I haven't done the research enough on those minor asteroids and planets such as Vesta and Pluto to give interpretations on them yet, or at least to feel confident about my interpretations, but those will eventually be included. If you know about those asteroids and you have an interpretations on what it would mean to have a full moon conjunct someone's natal Vesta and Pluto or Juno, let us know in the comments below. And as far as doing the MCIC ascendant and descendant line, I personally just think of these as looking at what house it's in. If you have a full moon happening in your rising sign, that's going to be a focus on identity and appearance. If it's in your 7th house, it's going to be focused on relationships. If it's in your 10th house, it's going to be on career. If it's in your 4th house, it's going to be around family. Yes, it being closer to your lines, your ascendant, MC, all those are going to bring an emphasis to those themes, but also it could still be in your 12th house, your 9th house, your 6th house, or your 3rd house. So I personally don't give interpretations on those. I keep them brief, but if you wanted to dive deeper into that and you didn't get your questions answered on that, if you have a full moon happening conjunct one of these, if you want to learn more, book a reading in the link in the description below, where in 1 hour we dive deep into your chart and more. And feel free to give your own interpretations in the comments below. Let me know what planets I missed. Feel free to ask questions, and be sure to subscribe to YouTube channel and stay tuned for more videos. Last quick note, if you like these interpretations and you're thinking to yourself, I wish I could interpret astrology on my own, check out my astrology course, The Master Astrologer, in the link in the description below, where I share everything that I've learned about astrology in a clear, cohesive fashion that's just linear and simple to go through. We go through the zodiac signs, then the houses, then the planets, and we slowly layer your knowledge so that you can feel that you're competent in your interpretations, rather than having to go out into YouTube and blogs and trying to gather all this scattered information. If that sounds good to you, check it out. Link is in the description below. And you can get half off the course by commenting the words in all caps, Master Astrologer, and I will send you the details on how you can get 50% off the course. Link is in the description below. Check it out. Book a reading. Thank you guys so much for watching. I sincerely hope you enjoyed. Once again, my name's Isabelle, and from my heart to yours, namaste.